My son-in-law sold my late husband's $1.2 million vintage car collection while I was locked away in a wellness retreat he handpicked for me. When I returned home to an empty garage and demanded an explanation, he didn't flinch. Instead, he shoved me against the wall of my own hallway, his face twisted in a mocking grin, and called the police to report a confused elderly trespasser at my own address. But Marcus made one fatal mistake. He forgot that, for 32 years, I was a senior forensic auditor for the federal government. I don't just find missing money. I find the people who think they're smart enough to hide it. I am Eleanor Vance. At 65, I have spent my life staring into the digital shadows of white-collar criminals and dismantling corporate empires built on lies. I never thought my final audit would be of my own family, but as I stood in my driveway, watching the police cruiser pull up, while my daughter Leah looked away in tears, I made a silent vow. Marcus Thorne wanted my estate. He wanted my legacy. Instead, I was going to give him a masterclass in total financial liquidation. The nightmare began exactly 3 hours before the police arrived. I had stepped out of a black town car, feeling strangely heavy-headed, returning from a month-long holistic healing retreat in the Berkshires. My daughter, Leah, and her husband, Marcus, had been insistent. After my husband, Thomas, passed away a year ago, they claimed the grief was eroding my cognitive functions. They spoke about early-onset fog and mental fatigue. I was vulnerable, grieving, and I trusted them. Especially Leah. But as I walked toward the detached garage, the place where Thomas and I had spent our weekends for 40 years, the air felt thin. I punched the security code into the keypad. The heavy steel doors hummed as they slid upward. The silence that met me was deafening. The 1961 Jaguar E-Type was gone. The 1967 Shelby Mustang, the car Thomas had bought with his first big bonus, was gone. The Porsche 356 we had spent 5 years restoring together was gone. All 12 cars. There was nothing left but the faint smell of motor oil. And the dust outlines on the concrete where our history used to sit. I ran toward the main house, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I found them in the kitchen. Marcus was leaning against the marble island, casually scrolling through his phone, wearing a new Patek Philippe watch that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. Leah was sitting at the table, her eyes red, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea. "Where are the cars, Leah?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Where is Thomas's collection?" Leah wouldn't look at me. She stared into her tea, as if it were a crystal ball. It was Marcus who stood up, his smile thin and clinical. "Eleanor, we talked about this," he said. His voice was patronizing, the kind of tone you'd use for a confused toddler. "Your doctor said the upkeep of the estate was a primary stressor. We liquidated the clutter to fund your long-term care and cognitive therapy. It's for your own good." "Clutter?" I whispered. "That was your father's life, Leah. That was $1.2 million in physical assets. Where is the money?" "It's invested, Eleanor," Marcus said, stepping into my personal space. He was tall, athletic, and at that moment incredibly imposing. "In the future. Digital real estate, high-yield ventures. Things you simply wouldn't understand in your current condition." "I understand theft, Marcus," I snapped. I felt a spark of the old Eleanor, the woman who had stared down corrupt CEOs, flare up inside me. "Show me the bank statements. Now." That's when the mask slipped. The charming, successful son-in-law vanished. Marcus grabbed my shoulders and pinned me against the doorframe. It wasn't enough to hurt me physically, but the sheer disrespect of the gesture was a lightning bolt to my system. "You're going to listen very carefully," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "You have no records, you have no cars. And if you keep screaming, you're going to have no house. Leah and I have power of attorney. You're officially incapacitated. Now, go to your room before I call the paramedics to have you sedated." I looked at my daughter. "Leah, help me, tell him to stop." Leah finally looked up, but her eyes were vacant, filled with a terrifying mix of fear and conviction. "Mom, Marcus is just trying to protect our future. You've been forgetting things. The supplements helped, but you're still so confused. You almost left the stove on last month, remember?" I froze. I didn't remember leaving the stove on, but I did remember the supplements Marcus had been sending to the retreat. My forensic brain, suppressed by grief and whatever was in those pills, finally hummed to life. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being managed. Marcus called the police that afternoon, claiming I was having a manic episode induced by grief. Because I was calm when the officers arrived, And because I had my credentials and spoke with the clarity of a federal officer, they didn't take me to a psych ward. But they couldn't help me either. "It's a civil matter, ma'am," the sergeant said. Looking at the power of attorney document, Marcus waved in his face. A document that bore a signature that looked remarkably like mine, but had a slight tremor in the E that I would never make. I left that night. I didn't take a suitcase. I took my laptop, my external hard drives, and my husband's old leather satchel. I checked into a motel 2 towns over, the kind of place where people don't ask questions, and I called the only person I could trust. Sarah Jenkins. Sarah had been my junior auditor for a decade. She was the best bloodhound in the business. When I told her what happened, there was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. "Eleanor," she said, her voice grim, "if they're using the incapacity angle, they've been planning this for months. You need a full forensic sweep of Marcus Thorne, not just his bank accounts. I mean his soul." "Do it, Sarah," I said, staring at my reflection in the dim motel mirror. My eyes were sunken, but the fog was lifting. "I want every shell company, every closed account, and every alias. I want to know who Marcus Thorne was before he met my daughter." 24 hours later, I was sitting in Sarah's home office. She had 3 monitors running, filled with spreadsheets, marriage licenses, and criminal court records. "He's a ghost, Eleanor," Sarah whispered. "Or he was. Before he met Leah 5 years ago, Marcus Thorne didn't exist. His social security number was issued 10 years ago to a Marcus Vance in Florida, who died in a boating accident. But his fingerprints from a minor juvenile arrest 20 years ago belonged to a man named Harold Rickman." She slid a tablet across the desk. "Harold Rickman has a pattern. He doesn't just steal money. He targets high-net-worth widows with vulnerable children. He marries the child, isolates the parent, and then uses a medical crisis to liquidate the assets." I scrolled through the files. My stomach turned. Victim uno. Agua Fur in Orlando. Lost $600,000 and her home. Died of an accidental overdose of sleeping pills 2 weeks after Marcus disappeared. Victim 2. A woman in Arizona. Currently in a state-run facility with unexplained cognitive decline. All assets gone. "The cognitive decline, Sarah," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "The supplements." "I pulled the pharmacy records Marcus used for your herbal boosters," Sarah said. "They weren't herbal. He's been compounding small doses of scopolamine and benzodiazepines. It's a cocktail designed to make a victim suggestible, drowsy, and most importantly compliant. It mimics the early stages of dementia perfectly." I leaned back, a cold, calculating rage settling into my bones. Marcus Thorne Harold Rickman wasn't just a thief. He was a predator who was systematically poisoning me, while sitting at my dinner table and calling me mom. But he had made a mistake. He assumed I was a soft target. He assumed that because I was 65 and grieving, my professional instincts had died with my husband. He didn't realize that as a senior forensic auditor, I kept shadow logs encrypted, off-network backups of my financial life, that not even my daughter knew existed. "He thinks he's moved the car money into digital real estate," I told Sarah. "But money always leaves a footprint. And I'm going to follow his until it leads to his neck." I didn't stay in that motel for long. A forensic auditor knows that to catch a thief, you have to watch where he sleeps. I needed to be inside the house. I needed to see the documents Marcus was signing. And, more importantly, I needed to gather physical evidence of the drugging. I returned to my estate the following evening. I made sure to look disheveled, my eyes slightly glazed, mimicking the suggestible state the scopolamine was intended to produce. As I walked through the front door, Marcus was in the foyer, speaking in hushed, urgent tones into his gold-plated smartphone. He hung up the moment he saw me, his expression shifting from irritation to a predatory warmth. "Eleanor! We were so worried," he said, stepping forward to take my arm. I felt a wave of revulsion, but I forced my muscles to go limp. I let him lead me toward the kitchen. "Leah has been crying all night. She thought you'd wandered off in a state of confusion." Leah was there, her face pale, her eyes darting between me and Marcus. "Mom, thank God. Where were you?" I don't know," I whispered, staring at a spot on the wall. "I just started driving. Everything felt so foggy. I think I forgot where the house was for a moment." Marcus squeezed my arm, a gesture that looked like support but felt like a threat. "That's exactly what the doctor warned us about. You're overexerting yourself. Leah, honey, why don't you get your mother some of her special tea and that supplement?" I watched Leah. I watched the way her hands shook as she reached for the cabinet. She wasn't a cold-blooded killer. She was a victim of psychological warfare. Marcus had convinced her that I was a ticking time bomb of dementia, and that he was the only thing keeping our family from exploding. She handed me the cup. I caught the faint metallic scent of the compound. I took a sip, letting the liquid touch my tongue, and then, while Marcus was distracted by a notification on his watch, I spit it back into the dark ceramic mug. I think I need to rest, I said, my voice slurring slightly. Of course, Marcus said. I'll help you upstairs. Oh, and Eleanor? Don't worry about the house paperwork. I've had the realtor come by to take some photos. We're going to simplify your life. You'll thank me later. As he led me up the stairs, I noticed a new stack of documents on the library desk. Even from a distance, I recognized the letterhead of a high-risk bridge loan company. Marcus wasn't just selling the cars. He was leveraging the house itself. He was bleeding the asset before the final liquidation. Once locked in my room, I didn't sleep. I waited until I heard the muffled sounds of Marcus and Leah arguing in their wing of the house. Leah's voice was high and panicked. Marcus's was a low, rhythmic growl of reassurance and command. I pulled my laptop from its hiding place under the floorboards of the walk-in closet. A secret compartment Thomas had built for our valuables decades ago. I logged into my encrypted shadow server. Sarah Jenkins had been busy. A new file appeared on my screen. Thorn Marcus Offshore Map. I spent the next 4 hours doing what I do best, following the blood trail of the money. Marcus was using a sophisticated layering technique. The $1.2 million from the car sales hadn't been deposited into a standard brokerage account. Instead, it had been split into 12 installments of $100,000, moved through a series of shell companies registered in Delaware, then funneled into an online social casino based in Cyprus. To a standard bank investigator, it looked like high-volume entertainment spending. But I saw the pattern. The money wasn't being gambled away in the traditional sense. It was being washed. The casino was a front. After the money stayed in the casino accounts for 48 hours, it was withdrawn as winnings into a private digital wallet. But then I saw the god drop, the mistake every arrogant criminal eventually makes. Marcus had set up the Delaware shell companies as revocable living trusts. To keep his own name off the federal radar, and avoid a background check that might link him to Harold Rickman, he had listed Leah as the primary trustee and beneficial owner. He thought he was being clever by using her as a shield. He thought that because Leah was under his thumb, she would never look at the filings. But in the eyes of the law, Leah was the owner of those shell companies. And as her mother and the original owner of the stolen assets, I had the audit rights to challenge those trusts, if I could prove they were funded with embezzled capital. The next morning, Marcus took the escalation further. He invited a woman named Dr. Aristone to the house. She was a geriatric consultant with a cold, clinical smile, and a briefcase that smelled of expensive leather and corruption. Eleanor, Marcus said, standing in the sun-drenched living room. Dr. Aristone is just here to do a quick cognitive assessment. It's a requirement for the estate transition. I sat on the sofa, playing the part of the fading matriarch. I intentionally failed the clock-drawing test, smudging the numbers as if I couldn't remember where they went. I saw Marcus and the doctor exchange a knowing glance. It's quite advanced, Dr. Aristone whispered, loud enough for me to hear. She's losing her sense of spatial awareness. We need to move quickly on the guardianship papers. Mom, please, Leah cried, clutching her elbows. Just listen to the doctor. She wants to help. Leah, honey, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fake confusion and very real heartbreak. Do you remember the Jaguar? The one your father taught you to drive in? Leah's face crumpled. Mom, don't. He's gone, Leah, Marcus interrupted, his voice like iron. The car is gone, and the memories are fading. This is why we need the doctor. You're not safe, Eleanor. You almost left the stove on again this morning. I had to put it out. I hadn't been near the stove. Marcus was planting false memories, a classic tactic in elder abuse. He was building a narrative of incompetence, so thick that no court would ever take my word over his. But I had something Marcus didn't expect. I had a tiny, high-definition recorder hidden in my cardigan pocket, catching every word of Dr. Aristone's assessment, and Marcus's blatant lies. I need a glass of water, I said, standing up unsteadily. As I walked to the kitchen, I saw the realtor's for sale sign lying on the porch. Marcus wasn't just planning to sell the house, he had already listed it. The closing date was set for 2 weeks from now. He was in a hurry. He was desperate. And a desperate predator is a predator who takes shortcuts. That afternoon, Marcus went to the office, which Sarah had already confirmed was a co-working space he used to meet other victims. I called Leah into the library. Leah, I need you to look at me. Not as Marcus's wife, but as my daughter. Mom, I can't do this right now. Marcus says you're trying to manipulate me. Marcus is Harold Rickman, Leah, I said, my voice flat and professional. She froze. Who? I opened my laptop. I didn't show her the complicated spreadsheets. I showed her the faces. I showed her the obituary of Beatrice Hall. I showed her the Arizona police report for Catherine Lowe. He marries the child, Leah. He drugs the parent. He steals the estate. And then he leaves the child to face the legal consequences. Leah shook her head, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. No, he loves me. He saved me when I was depressed after Dad died. He says you're just paranoid. Look at the signatures, Leah. I pulled up the Delaware Shell Company filings. Your name is on these documents. You are the one the IRS will come for when the $1.2 million in laundered car money is flagged. Marcus isn't protecting you. He's using you as a human shield. Leah stared at her own signature on the screen. A digital signature she didn't remember authorizing. Marcus had used her login credentials to sign her up for a felony. He told me it was just paperwork for our retirement, she whispered, her voice breaking. He said it was to keep the money safe from the government's death tax. Leah, he's been drugging me. The supplements. I've had them tested. It's scopolamine. He's erasing my mind to get to the house. For a moment, I saw the daughter I raised return. The fog in her eyes cleared, replaced by a cold, sharp terror. What do we do? Mom, he has the power of attorney. He's already signed the bridge loan. He has $500,000 sitting in an escrow account that clears tomorrow. I took her hand. It was ice cold. We're going to perform a strategic audit, Leah. If you are the trustee of those companies, you have the legal power to dissolve them. And as for the house loan, Marcus forgot that I'm still the primary on the title. A power of attorney doesn't override a clouded title if there is an active fraud investigation. But the night wasn't over. Marcus returned home early, and he didn't look happy. He had found out that the escrow account for the house loan had been flagged for additional verification. He stormed into the library where Leah and I were standing. He didn't look like a charming husband anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. What did you do, Eleanor? He growled, slamming his phone onto the desk. The bank is asking questions they shouldn't be asking. They're talking about discrepancies in the title. Leah stepped back, her face a mask of terror. I stood my ground. Maybe they're just doing their job, Marcus, I said. Maybe they realized that a 5-year-old woman with a perfect credit history doesn't suddenly take out a high-interest bridge loan while she's in a wellness retreat. Marcus's eyes darted to Leah. Did you talk to them? Did you call the bank? Leah stammered. Marcus grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her with a violence that made my blood run cold. I told you to handle the calls. I told you to tell them she was confused. If this loan doesn't go through, we lose everything. Let her go, Marcus, I said, my voice as steady as a surgeon's knife. He turned on me, his fist clenched. You think you're so smart. You think your little audit skills matter in the real world. This isn't a spreadsheet, Eleanor. This is my life. And I'm not going back to prison because an old lady couldn't learn to keep her mouth shut. He stepped toward me, and for a second, I thought he was going to finish what he started in the hallway. But then, he stopped. He smiled a slow, terrifying grin. Fine, he said. If you won't be compliant, we'll just have to speed up the cognitive decline. Leah, go get the heavy dose from the car. We're putting your mother to bed. For a very long time. Leah stood frozen, looking at her husband. The man who was now openly threatening her mother's life. This was the moment. The audit was over. The war had begun. Go, Leah. Get the bag from the car. Marcus's voice cracked with a desperation I had never heard before. He was no longer the composed, charismatic entrepreneur. He was a cornered animal, seeing his exit routes closing one by one. Leah didn't move. She stood between us, her eyes darting from Marcus to me. The supplements Marcus had forced her to give me weren't just chemicals. They were the chains he had used to bind her loyalty. But those chains were fraying. Marcus, stop, she whispered. Mom said you've done this before. She showed me the names. Beatrice, Catherine. Is it true? Marcus took a step toward her, his face softening into that practiced, manipulative mask. Honey, your mother is sick. She's hallucinating. She's trying to destroy our marriage because she's lonely and bitter. Do you really believe a spreadsheet over your own husband? I'm not believing a spreadsheet, Marcus, I said, stepping forward. I felt the strength returning to my limbs. The fog was almost entirely gone. I'm believing the audit trail. And right now, the audit says you are bankrupt. Marcus laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. Bankrupt? I have $1.2 million in the Cyprus accounts, Eleanor. And by tomorrow, I'll have $500,000 from the bridge loan. I'm just getting started. Check your phone, Marcus, I said calmly. Check the Delaware Trust notifications. His brow furrowed. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his thumb sliding frantically across the screen. I watched as the color drained from his face. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he stopped breathing. What is this? Trust dissolution? Asset reversion? He looked at Leah, his expression turning venomous. What did you do? I signed the papers, Marcus, Leah said, her voice growing stronger. While you were out meeting your investors, Mom and I had a long talk. I'm the primary trustee of those Delaware companies, remember? You put my name on them to hide from the FBI. Well, as the owner, I exercised my right to dissolve the trust and return the funds to their original source, my mother's estate. Marcus lunged at her, his hand raised. You stupid bee. I didn't wait. I didn't have the physical strength to fight him, but I had the tactical advantage. I pressed the emergency alert button on my laptop, which was linked directly to the local police department and Sarah Jenkins's secure line. The money is gone, Marcus, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet library. The Cyprus casino accounts have been flagged for money laundering. The bank has frozen the bridge loan. You have no capital. You have no leverage. And most importantly, you have no more victims. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. Marcus looked at the door, then at the window, then back at us. He was calculating his escape, but a forensic auditor leaves no room for exits. You think this is over? Marcus hissed, reaching into his jacket. I'll be out in 48 hours. I have connections. I'll come back for every cent. You won't be coming back, Harold, I said, using his real name. He froze at the mention of Harold Rickman. Agent Miller and the FBI have been tracking your digital footprint. Since Sarah and I uploaded the compliance map to the federal portal this morning, I continued. They don't just want you for the cars or the house. They want you for the interstate wire fraud and the unexplained deaths of your previous targets. They found the medical records in Arizona, Harold. They know about the scopolamine. The front door burst open. I heard the heavy boots of the tactical team and the crisp, authoritative voice of Agent Miller. FBI, hands in the air. Marcus Thorne, stay where you are. Marcus tried to bolt for the back exit, but Sarah Jenkins was already there, standing beside two local officers. The man who had tried to erase my mind was tackled to the floor of my own library. As they pressed his face into the Persian rug Thomas and I had bought on our honeymoon, Marcus didn't look like a predator anymore. He looked small. He looked pathetic. Leah collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I walked over to her and pulled her into my arms. We didn't say anything. There were no words for the 5 years of lies she had lived through, or the month I had spent being poisoned in my own home. Agent Miller walked over to us, his expression grim but respectful. Mrs. Vance, we've secured his laptop and his vehicle. We found a secondary stash of compounded medications in a hidden compartment in his trunk. That's enough for a first-degree felony charge for endangerment. Thank you, Agent, I said. And the doctor? Dr. Aristone? She was arrested at her clinic 20 minutes ago, Miller replied. She's already talking. She's claiming Marcus blackmailed her. But we have the wire transfer records showing her consulting fees came directly from your car sales. Every piece of the puzzle was clicking into place. The audit was complete. The weeks following the arrest were a grueling blur of legal depositions, medical exams, and financial reconstruction. As the scopolamine finally cleared from my system, the fog Marcus had carefully curated vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Leah was the true surprise. She was far stronger than Marcus had estimated. She threw herself into intensive therapy, deconstructing the years of gaslighting and psychological manipulation. Watching her realize that her 5-year marriage was a meticulously crafted fraud was heartbreaking, but it was the fire she needed to burn the bridge to her past. We sold the estate immediately. I couldn't walk past the kitchen without seeing Marcus's predatory grin, or enter the library without hearing the echo of his threats. I bought a modern, sun-drenched house on the coast, a sanctuary with high ceilings and a security system I programmed myself. The financial audit was less perfect but satisfactory. We recovered $900,000 of the stolen $1.2 million. The rest had disappeared into offshore consulting fees and bribes. To some, $300,000 is a fortune. To me, it was a fair price for my life and my daughter's freedom. One morning, Sarah Jenkins called me to the shipping docks. "Eleanor, your husband's legacy just cleared customs." As the heavy steel doors of a shipping container swung open, a flash of British racing green caught the sun. My 1961 Jaguar E-Type. "How?" I whispered, my hand trembling against the cool metal. "The collector in Dubai was a former client," Sarah smiled. "When he heard the car was part of a forensic fraud case, he didn't just sell it back, he covered the shipping. He said a Jag like this belongs with the woman who kept the records to find it." I sat in the driver's seat, the scent of old leather and gasoline acting as the final antidote to Marcus's poison. Thomas was back. We were home. It has been 1 year since Marcus Thorne-born Harold Rickman was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Leah and I visit him once every 6 months. We don't speak. I simply want him to see me, sharp, healthy, and entirely in control. Leah and I are rebuilding. It's slow, and some nights are still heavy with the past, but we are independent. We are safe. And we are free. Trust your instincts, but verify them with the data. Never let anyone convince you that you don't have the right to manage your own life. Independence is your greatest asset. Protect it with everything you have. Thank you for following this audit to the end. If Eleanor's victory gave you strength, please share this video.